I was ordered to write what should not have been possible. The archives of the Watcher Corps state with certainty that Vault Sigma IX had remained sealed for 9 millennia, its triple sanctity confirmed by mechanical, psychic, and gene-coded locks. Yet I saw it ajar with my own eyes. The enormous adamantium gate tilted open by no more than a hand's breadth, its seals unbroken and its alarms silent. Even now, as I set these words to record, the logic of it falters in my mind. A Custodes vault does not open, not without command, not without thunder, not without ritual. We stood in the Sanctum Imperialis, far beneath the palace, where the stone is older than any human memory, and the weight of the mountain above presses like judgment. The air here should have been stale and frozen, dead of all moisture. Instead, it pressed warm against my skin, heavy with a cloying dampness, as though the vault exhaled. My robes stuck to my back. Droplets traced the seams of the walls. It felt alive. The strike cadre of custodians advanced without hesitation, 5 of them, golden giants, moving as one. Their armor caught what little light our lumen orbs gave, reflecting it like captured Sunday. Yet even they shifted uneasily, though none would admit it. I heard a whispered phrase, just a fragment, one custodian invoking the throne's protection beneath his breath. That alone chilled me more than the unnatural humidity. The Legio Custodes do not whisper. I activated my scribe auspex, every cogitator rune flickering red with error. Vox links trembled with static when I attempted to signal the surface. I logged each failure mechanically, the way one logs rainfall, but inside I understood. Whatever ruled here desired no witness beyond those chosen. The custodians approached the breach in formation, halberds raised, bolters slung, each step ritualized perfection. The lead warrior extended a gauntleted hand, touching the cold edge of the vault door. His gauntlet steamed at the componenti. Contact, though no heat registered on his helm's readouts. I saw the faintest twitch in his movement, as if a second's hesitation dared to exist. "Advance," came his voice, low, unwavering, yet strained as though carried through stone. They forced the gate wider. It yielded without sound, without resistance, as if it wanted to be entered. Beyond was darkness, absolute and thick, swallowing the lumen glare after only a few paces. I recorded every detail, though my words feel less like writing and more like confession. I stepped after them, the smallest among giants, my feet slapping damp stone, my stylus trembling in my hand. The air grew hotter with each step inward, sweat stinging my eyes. Behind us, the lumen strips of the corridor flickered once, then failed. The only illumination came from the warriors' halberd lights, narrow cones cutting slices into the dark. The silence inside pressed so heavily I thought my ears had ruptured. No echo of our footsteps returned, as though the chamber absorbed sound itself. I tried to steady my breathing, counting silently in high Gothic measure, anchoring myself with litany. By the throne, by the golden throne, by the silent Lord enthroned. The words tasted bitter. Then the vault spoke, not with voice, but with movement. The door behind us, that immense slab of sacred adamantium, closed. It did not slam. It did not grind. It simply sealed, sliding back into place with the inevitability of a heartbeat. None of the custodians had commanded it. We turned in unison. I saw the seam vanish. No locks engaged. No mechanism groaned. It was gone, seamless, smooth, as though it had never opened at all. My lumen auspex registered only a blank wall. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the custodians, paragons of unyielding resolve, were statues of gold. My throat worked soundlessly, my notes scrawling uneven, stylus cutting too deep into parchment. We were locked within a chamber untouched for 9,000 years. The air pressed hotter, heavier, alive. I realized with dread that I had written the truth already, before I understood it. The vault had exhaled, and we had walked willingly into its lungs. And now it had drawn breath again, sealing us inside. The custodians did not falter long before advancing, their halberds casting long shafts of lumen across the dark. The beams slid over walls that were not bare stone or adamantium plates as I had expected, but engraved surfaces, their depth and precision unlike any craft I had ever seen. Geometries cut into the metal shimmered faintly in our light, but when I blinked, they seemed altered angles shifted, circles bent inward, lines that once ran parallel now converged to a point. I checked my Auspex lens again and again, certain it was distortion, but the patterns themselves pulsed as though alive beneath the wall's skin. No Vox command had been given, yet my earpiece hissed alive with Binharic ciphers, tones and countertones layered so tightly they sounded like voices choking on static. I recorded every syllable, but I knew they matched no recognized dialect. One custodian tilted his helm as though listening to something none of the others heard, then returned wordlessly to formation. The silence in the chamber only grew thicker, as though each step further in pressed us into some vast unseen weight. Their movements slowed, not out of hesitation, but as if the vault itself resisted. Every stride met unseen drag, every swing of a halberd light grew heavy. I saw golden armor refract strangely, reflections bent in ways that did not match their bodies. A custodian raised his gauntlet before him, and the light upon his palm folded inward, distorted into a cone pointing toward his chest. Even their auramite seemed unwilling to remain pure here. I wrote as my heart hammered, counting every breath. Warm air pooled heavy around my lungs, but the stone beneath our feet chilled through my sandals. The contradiction gnawed at reason. Breathless cold from below, stifling heat from above. The custodians pressed forward still, their discipline unbroken, though I could see the faint strain at the edges of their perfection. One halted, raising his Auspex module. Glyphs flared across his visor display, too quick for me to decipher. He turned, voice sharp and flat. Biological readings. Distance, 60 meters. I froze. Such readings were impossible. This chamber, by record, contained only relics sealed from the old night, inert and sacred. No flora, no fauna, nothing that lived. Yet the Auspex pulsed steadily, life signatures registering deep within the vault. Artifact resonance? Another asked. Negative, pattern indistinct, no known classification. The silence that followed was worse than any confirmation. They knew as well as I that augurs do not err within the palace's heart. If the machine read life, then life existed here, life that had no right to be. We pressed onward, compelled as much by duty as by the impossibility of retreat. I clutched my data slate so tightly my knuckles whitened, every muscle screaming to turn back. But custodians do not turn back, and neither does the one tasked to record them. Our path narrowed into a corridor lined with recesses, each housing a shape half concealed by shadow. I thought at first they were more engravings, until the halberd lights revealed carved forms, statues of warriors, larger than human but not quite custodian. They stood frozen in martial poses, weapons clutched to their chests, helms featureless save for faint grooves suggesting eyes. Their composition defied analysis. Not marble, not stone, not auramite. A hybrid of all, or something beyond. My Auspex could not settle, readings leaping from inorganic to faint traces of carbon, as though the statues vacillated between life and matter. We passed them one by one, 9 in total, their placement exact, each watching the path ahead. The custodians did not pause, though I noticed their formation tightened, shields subtly angled toward the effigies. When the last of the 9 receded behind us, the chamber widened. Before us stood a reliquary shrine, its dais layered in dust so deep it should have dulled every edge. Yet the shrine gleamed, pristine, as though polished by unseen hands. Scrolls lined its flanks, though the script was alien, unindexed, resistant to translation even through my cipher implants. The custodians spread into guard formation. The shrine pulsed faintly with light from within, a glow no lumen cast. My throat tightened. The air felt heavy as molten lead. I raised my stylus with shaking hand, ready to record. When I heard it, the faint scrape of stone upon stone. At first, I thought it was the walls settling. Then I looked back. The statues we had passed stood differently. Not much, only slight. Heads inclined where once they faced forward. Arms shifted a degree outward. But enough. Enough that I knew with absolute certainty. They had turned toward us. The custodians reacted with silent precision, halberds raised as their formation pivoted back toward the corridor. I clutched my slate, forcing my hands to stillness, though every instinct screamed to flee. The statues loomed just beyond the lumen's edge, yet their subtle change of posture could not be denied. They had turned toward us, and in the silence that followed I swore I heard the faint rasp of inhalation, as though stone lungs had drawn a breath. The lead custodian gave a curt signal. One of the others advanced, weapon angled low, armor servos humming faintly. His gauntleted hand brushed the surface of the nearest statue. Instead of cold stone, he drew back sharply, helm tilting. "Warm," he said. His voice was flat, yet it carried disbelief. The word struck me harder than any gunshot. Warm. I crept closer, daring to extend a trembling hand toward the effigy. The surface yielded faint heat, like flesh beneath marble. I pressed my ear against it despite my terror, and nearly cried out when I caught the slow, rhythmic thrum. Not an echo, not machinery, a cadence like breath, rising and falling deep within the figure's chest. The custodians closed ranks again, halberds forming a golden line before me. Their leader's vox growled with authority, "Stand clear, we test further." Another warrior activated his helm's auspex array, data litanies flickering across his visor. He reported a pulsing resonance, faint but undeniable, akin to a heartbeat, irregular yet patterned. His systems registered microshocks, rhythmic, feeding back into his armor as if the statue pressed life into the machine. 9 of them stood along the corridor, each slightly different. I realized this as I studied them. One bore a cracked helm, another's hand clenched around a broken shaft, another missing half a pauldron. Subtle variations, not the perfect uniformity of crafted stone. These were individuals, not replicas. My mind scrambled for reference and found only the half-forbidden liturgies whispered in archives none should open. The Watchers of the Deep, guardians not wrought by human hands, who stood eternal in halls beneath the throne. I should not have remembered those words, but they rose unbidden. The custodians debated in terse, ritual tones. One suggested destruction, another warned against sacrilege. The leader's voice was iron. Observation first. The Emperor's will reveals itself in time. Their discipline never cracked, yet even they shifted uneasily within the oppressive air. Armor refracting light strangely, edges bending inward as though the vault itself bent vision. I continued to record, ink blurring under sweat dripping from my brow. The statue's presence pressed upon me, not hostile but immense, as though acknowledging us as intruders. My heart stuttered with each inhale they took, silent yet unmistakable. I forced my mind into calculation, counting their number aloud to steady. Myself. 9. Always 9. The custodians glanced at me but did not silence me, for perhaps the rhythm anchored them as well. Then it happened. One statue, the third from the entrance, shifted. Only a fraction, no more than a warrior adjusting stance, but enough. Its foot angled half a degree outward, the edge of its weapon tilted. The scrape was near imperceptible, yet all of us heard it. I felt bile rise in my throat. Statues do not breathe. Statues do not move. Yet this one had. The custodians responded instantly, halberds braced, bolters drawn. The leader's voice was a low command. "Hold fire. Confirm motion. The Auspex operator recalibrated, his systems humming audibly as he focused scans on the statues. His tone cracked for the first time. Detection confirms, not 9, 10. 10th presence unregistered origin. Location indeterminate. The word hung in the chamber like a curse. 10. The statues remained still, yet I felt their invisible gaze burrow into us, and somewhere in the suffocating dark, unseen, the 10th life stirred. The custodians reacted instantly, formation tightening until I stood shielded within a ring of auramite and halberds. Their armor, radiant even in the gloom, became a wall against the unknown. Yet the air shifted in that moment, a change so sudden I gasped aloud. Breath misted before me, white and fragile. The vault's oppressive warmth drained away in a heartbeat, replaced by a cold so biting that frost webbed across the gilded curves of custodian plate. Their armor should have resisted such intrusion, yet ice crystals clung stubbornly, forming along seams and engravings, creeping like veins of frozen blood. One custodian voxed a litany of warding, his voice firm though static hissed strangely around the syllables. Then another voice joined, low and solemn, repeating the same words, though none of them spoke. The vox crackled with overlapping prayers, fragments of devotions carried on channels that had not been opened. Ave Imperator, shield us in the shadow. The cadence rose and fell like a choir buried beneath centuries of stone. My scalp prickled as I realized the words came from nowhere. I pressed against the floor, clutching my slate as if its weight might tether me to reality. Behind me, in the hollow space where no man stood, I felt it a pressure, a density of awareness. It was not sound, nor touch, but a certainty. Something leaned close, studying me, its scrutiny heavy as iron. I dared not turn, though every nerve screamed to confront what stalked just beyond vision. My teeth chattered, not only from the cold but from the intimate weight of that gaze. One custodian broke the tension. His bolter snapped up, trigger squeezed in perfect discipline. The round detonated into the dark recess above the statues. Instead of vanishing into stone, the shell ricocheted at an impossible vector, curving back like a comet bent by unseen gravity. It struck a sigil etched upon the far wall, one I had not noticed until it blazed alive, lines glowing with pale fire, geometry spiraling outward in forms too precise to be human craft. The light pulsed once, then steadied, casting shifting shadows that seemed to move counter to the source. The statues responded. All 9 released a simultaneous exhalation, a cavernous sigh of stale metallic air. Dust and iron tang filled my lungs, as though I had inhaled the breath of a tomb unopened for millennia. The noise was subtle, yet the force of it pushed back against us, stirring cloaks and banners that had not moved in ages. My stomach twisted as I realized they had not simply moved air, they had breathed it out. The custodians held fast, but their Auspex operator was no longer calm. His helm tilted, vox breaking with static. The 10th, it shifts, it moves, not in measurable vectors, not within 3 planes. He struck his gauntlet against the readout, as though brute force could correct the impossible. It is not here, not anywhere, yet it moves. The leader's command came sharp and final. Hold. Await manifestation. His tone admitted no fear, but even in his stance I detected the faintest rigidity, a warrior braced against that which defied all categories of enemy. I tried to steady my breathing, yet it caught in shallow bursts. The sensation behind me did not fade, it deepened, as if fingers traced the edges of my thoughts, searching, probing, selecting. The liturgical voices on the vox crescendoed, phrases fragmenting into overlapping chants, names I recognized and others I did not. Sigillite, Ophanim, Tetrarchs of 9. The custodians ignored the interference, but my quill snapped under the tremor of my grip. Then the vault itself transformed. No lumen burned, no torch lit, yet illumination spread without source. pouring from nowhere and everywhere at once. The stone glowed not with color but with clarity. Every carving, every seam revealed in merciless detail. Shadows no longer obeyed form. They sprawled in directions that contradicted geometry, stretching where no light shone. My eyes watered under the sudden brilliance, yet still the pressure behind me lingered, invisible, unanchored, yet undeniable. The 10th presence had entered the room. The brilliance, with no source, steadied, and within its impossible glow we saw the vault's heart at last. Beyond the ring of statues stretched a wide chamber, its floor inlaid with spiraling sigils that drew the eye inward, as though compelling all focus toward a single point. At the center stood a dais of seamless black stone, polished smooth yet utterly unreflective. Upon it rested a reliquary, encased in crystal stasis that shimmered with an inner frost. The field's hum was barely perceptible, a sound not heard with the ears but felt in the bones. Even before we approached, I sensed that this was the axis around which the vault's purpose revolved. The custodians advanced in tight formation, weapons raised, but steady, their golden armor glinting against the sourceless illumination. The reliquary drew all eyes. It was no ornate casket of imperial make, no reliquary in the style of saints or martyrs. It was plain, functional, yet wrong in proportions, as though designed by hands that did not know human scale. Within the crystalline suspension lay a blade. Its shape resisted clarity. One moment it seemed curved, another jagged, its edges warping as if memory itself could not settle upon its form. Across its surface shimmered veins of dull crimson, pulsing faintly, like a slowed heartbeat. And though no mouth spoke, I heard it whisper, not in words entirely, but in fragments, syllables that carried both cadence and void, a half-human resonance that sank into marrow. The custodians halted in disciplined silence, helms tilted as though weighing judgment. Then one, his voice deep and measured, broke the stillness. "This pattern is unknown. It is not mechanicum, not Xenos of recorded type." His gauntlet brushed a rune upon his vambrace, but the auspex returned nothing but static. "It should not be." Another custodian, older in bearing, spoke with restrained gravity. "There are records, fragmented, of the wars before man's rising, of the old night, of the war in heaven itself." He inclined his head toward the reliquary. "Such a weapon may be of that age. If so, it does not belong to us." A third countered with iron certainty. "It is a relic. Whatever its source, it lies within the Sanctum Imperialis. That makes it the throne's charge. We must contain, secure, report." The debate, though spoken softly, pressed against me with the weight of choice. Their words were not for me, yet I felt the echo of them as judgment. I lingered near the dais, compelled by something I did not name. My hands trembled, ink smearing across the slate as I tried to record what I could, but my gaze fixed upon the crystal prison. The whispering rose, not in volume but in intimacy, threading itself into my thoughts. It spoke in tones neither hostile nor kind, only inevitable. I stumbled, hand striking the dais to steady myself. In that instant, all barriers shattered. A surge of vision drowned me, a torrent that eclipsed sight and sound. I stood upon fields of fire where legions of golden warriors fought, their brilliance blinding yet breaking. They screamed not as mortals, but as titans who had believed themselves unassailable. Light, endless and originless, lanced through them, unraveling their forms. Their banners burned, their voices drowned in static hymns. I saw custodians fall in heaps, faceless and endless, their halberds shattering like glass before radiance without source. The sky itself tore apart, revealing not void but something older, deeper, watching. I cried out, collapsing to the cold stone. The vision seared through me like molten lead. Hands seized my shoulders, one of the custodians pulling me back, his grip firm yet cautious. My lungs burned as though I had drowned, every breath shallow, ragged. The vault spun in fragments, voices distant. When clarity returned, I lay upon the floor, slate shattered beside me. My limbs trembled with weakness, sweat freezing against my skin. I pushed myself upright, throat raw, and my eyes fell again upon the dais. The stasis field was gone. The crystal that had cocooned the reliquary was fractured, shards dissolving like mist into the air. The hum that had thrummed in my bones had ceased. Suspended above the dais, weightless and defiant of all reason, the blade floated free. Its form no longer blurred, it was sharp, real, and wrong. Its surface pulsed with dull red light, veins brightening in slow rhythm, as though it drew breath for the first time in aeons. The whispers had ceased, yet the silence they left was worse, charged with promise, heavy with the presence of something awakened. The custodians shifted stance, weapons raised as one. Their helms caught the pulsing glow, reflections twisting across auramite like blood-stained gold. None spoke, for none needed to. The vault itself had shifted again, and all of us knew. What was bound was now free. The blade's pulse filled the vault with a rhythm too steady to be natural, like a heart that did not belong to flesh. It bled light in waves, each surge dimming and swelling, and with every beat the whispers returned stronger now, no longer merely brushing the edges of thought but pressing deeper into marrow and memory. The custodians moved in unison, weapons raised but halting, their leader's gauntlet lifted in a gesture that froze all motion. His voice, calm yet carrying weight enough to shatter stone, cut through the thickening hum. Protocol of silence. The words struck me with unfamiliarity, yet every custodian responded as if bound by ancient oath. Their halberds lowered, planted firm against the sigil-strewn floor, and they formed a circle around the dais. From their vox grills came chant, not battle cry but solemn liturgy, layered in tones so deep the vault itself seemed to vibrate. Each syllable rolled with the cadence of ritual buried for millennia. Their voices trembled not with fear, but with the strain of invoking something vast and dangerous, a rite that was never meant for mortal ears. The air thickened. Metallic taste flooded my tongue, sharp as blood and rust. Pressure built inside my skull, static grinding in my ears as though vox interference had crept into bone itself. The chant wove tighter, yet the artifact answered. Its resonance swelled, vibrating through auramite and into flesh. I saw one custodian's armor tremor visibly, pauldrons rattling as though the metal rejected its own integrity. The blade's whispers no longer carried alien syllables, but fragments of high Gothic, reversed and distorted, syllables peeling apart like broken prayers. Onimod, Onimod. The circle strained, their voices rising. A custodian at my left advanced, toward the weapon, golden gauntlets spreading as runes etched along his armor flared in searing light. He bore sealing plates, inscribed with the Emperor's name in 20 tongues, relics drawn only in desperation. His chant merged with the ritual, a higher register of command meant to bind. He pressed the first seal against the relic's glow. What followed broke all sense of order. His auramite split like old parchment, golden plates rupturing outward as though pried apart from within. From the fractures burst not blood but calcified growth, jagged white stone erupting where flesh had been. His arm petrified in seconds, veins stiffening into marble lines before spreading across his chest. His scream was muffled, strangled by the hardening of his throat, and then he burst apart. Shards of stone clattered across the floor, each fragment steaming with the stench of bone and dust. Nothing living remained. Horror gripped even those titans of gold. For the first time their circle faltered, chant breaking as they staggered back. The protocol quivered on their lips, dissonant, its unity fractured. I collapsed to my knees, bile surging in my throat, the copper sting of blood filling my mouth. My eyes burned, vision fractured by patterns I did not understand, symbols imprinted against my sight that would not fade. The custodian leader's voice thundered again, "Withdraw." It was command and lifeline. They turned in unison, weapons braced, moving toward the sealed entrance. Yet when they reached it, the door did not yield. No mechanism stirred. The seal, once obedient to their command, now stood immovable. The vault had locked us within its will. Silence fell, not absence of sound, but suffocation of it. Into that silence came the grinding of stone. I turned, trembling, and saw what had changed. The 9 statues no longer stood inert. Their forms shifted, weight pressing into the floor, stone feet grinding against ancient sigils, their chiseled visages tilted, slow as dawn, each gaze fixing upon us with intent. Their surfaces, once dull, exuded faint warmth and breath again, the rhythm undeniable. They inhaled as one, their chests rising with a sound like cracking granite. The custodians raised weapons, formation instinctive even in despair, but I knew before their leader spoke that battle would not restore control. These were not mere statues. They had been vessels all along, waiting in stillness, guardians not born of human hand. And now, in the silence of broken ritual and failed seal, they awakened. The stillness shattered. One of the stone vessels lunged forward with impossible speed, its carved bulk blurring into motion that defied weight. A custodian met it, halberd spinning in a perfect arc, striking with the precision of 10,000 years of discipline. The blade cracked against granite flesh, sparks spilling into the gloom, and then the vault erupted into chaos. Bolters roared, each detonation a thunderclap confined within suffocating stone. The air filled with smoke, dust, and the concussive force of explosives unleashed at point-blank range. I flinched as golden giants braced and fired, their shells ripping chunks from the statues' forms. But what poured forth from the wounds was not the collapse of dead stone. It was liquid, viscous, and thick, spraying black across auramite plate. The ichor steamed on contact, hissing, searing into the golden sheen like acid poured upon sacred metal. The custodians did not falter. One pressed forward, halberd thrust driving through the chest of a vessel. For a moment I believed victory was assured, until the split revealed not hollowness but wet sinew and fibrous muscle hidden beneath the shell. The surface of stone cracked further, pieces sloughing away like a discarded skin. A face half hidden beneath was revealed, stretched and broken, features wrong in proportion yet eerily human. The vessel did not die. It bled, screamed a sound like granite tearing, and seized the halberd shaft, wrenching it aside with strength enough to hurl the custodian backwards into a pillar. The impact shook the vault. I ducked low, crawling into the shadow of fractured masonry, the shattered edges cutting into my palms. I dared not breathe loudly. From my hiding place, I watched as titans clashed, each strike ringing like thunder. Golden armor met corrupted flesh stone, halberds carving arcs that split the air. Yet for every vessel that cracked apart beneath the custodian's fury, another rose in its place, ichor spraying in sheets across the floor. The sound was unbearable, wet impacts of ichor against armor, metallic shrieks as halberd edges scraped against impossible flesh, the choking hiss of golden plate corroding under black blood. It was war made intimate, stripped of glory, reduced to the grinding of bone and stone. My ears rang, yet my mind recorded every detail, as if compelled to etch the moment into eternal archive. I dared glance upward, and there it was, the reliquary blade, no longer resting upon the dais. It floated freely between the warring giants, suspended by no visible tether, drifting as if carried by the rhythm of slaughter. With each death cry, each spray of ichor, its pulse grew brighter, a dull red glow feeding upon the carnage. It lingered near the dying, circling, drinking in unseen essence. The whispers bled louder, layered, their language folding over itself until it was less word than hunger. The custodians fought undaunted, their formation fracturing yet their skill unbroken. One cleaved a vessel's arm clean through, only to be seized in turn by 2 others, their claws digging into the seams of his armor. They tore with a sound that I can still hear even now, a screech of auramite wrenched apart, followed by the wetness of a body crushed inside its shell. His scream was brief, cut short by rupture. The ichor splashed wide, marking the walls with stains that glistened like oil and writhed faintly, as if alive. Another fell, impaled by jagged stone fingers that had no right to move with such speed. His blood joined the black spray, gold and crimson mingling in grotesque harmony. The vault floor ran slick with it, a mirror of death reflecting the pale light from nowhere. I pressed my hands over my ears, yet the whispers penetrated bone and sinew. My name, my own name, echoed within them, spoken in reverse, drawn out until syllables fractured. My chest heaved as panic gave way to something worse, recognition. For within that alien litany I discerned order, pattern, cadence that belonged to no tongue I had studied yet, was carved into me as though it had always been there. And then it happened. My lips moved. At first I thought I whimpered, begging for deliverance. But no, it was chant. Words flowed from me unbidden, a litany precise in rhythm, perfect in tone. Not low Gothic, nor high, but something older even than the fragments whispered through the vox. I clamped my jaw shut, yet still the sound emerged. My own voice a vessel for the prayer I had never learned. It rose above the clash of battle, woven into the vault's discordant symphony, feeding the resonance of the blade that hovered like a red star at the center of ruin. And as I chanted, the blade's glow turned toward me. The words came unbidden, spilling from my lips like water forced through cracked stone. I wrote, even as I spoke, my quill scratching furiously against the parchment, with a rhythm not entirely my own. The litany was not in the Emperor's high Gothic, but in some inverted mirror of it, each syllable twisted, each cadence wrong. It felt older than language itself, a residue of something vast and patient. I tried to stop, to press my lips shut, but the words kept flowing. My voice wavered between registers, higher and lower tones that did not belong to me. It was then I realized I was not alone within my skull. Something else spoke through me, coiling its thought around mine, tightening like a noose of cold smoke. A gauntleted hand clamped around my shoulder, wrenching me backward. "Resist! Resist!" The custodian's voice thundered, his tone edged with desperation that broke the illusion of their usual composure. He dragged me behind a fractured column, his armor dented and slick with ichor from the slaughter behind us. His breathing was ragged, his voice raw, yet he would not relent. "Fight it, scribe. The words are not yours, they are the enemy's." I tried, though every attempt was like trying to hold back the tide with bare hands. The litany pressed outward, scraping at my teeth and tongue, eager to find air, but the custodian's iron grip steadied me. He hauled me forward through a half-collapsed archway, deeper into the labyrinth of the vault. The walls were close here, lined with corroded sigils and dust-clogged alcoves where statues stared eyelessly. I stumbled, my ink vial cracking and spilling down my robe, but he did not slow. The thunder of battle echoed behind us, bolter fire, shrieks not of stone but of flesh tearing free from shells of marble. Each sound receded, but only because we fled further from it, not because it ceased. We descended narrow stairwells, torchlight sputtering as though repelled by the air itself. The custodian muttered oaths between clenched teeth, invoking the Emperor's name again and again, as if repetition alone could anchor him. Yet I heard the tremor in his voice. When, at last, we burst into a wide chamber, I thought we had found sanctuary. At its center stood a shrine, golden, towering, shaped in the image of the master of mankind himself. Relief swept through me until I saw it more clearly. The visage was wrong. The Emperor's features, carved in what should have been radiant perfection, were distorted. His eyes were hollow cavities, yawning pits that seemed to drink light rather than reflect it. His hands, raised in benediction, were reversed at the wrists, palms twisted backward, as though blessing turned inward into curse. The custodian staggered at the sight, his armored knees striking the stone with a metallic crash. His voice, once thunderous, fell to a broken whisper. "No. Impossible. The throne's light cannot." He pressed his hands to his helm, as though shielding his eyes from what he could not bear to behold. I could not move. The warped idol seemed alive, its hollow sockets pulling at me, tugging me forward. My mind throbbed with the same inverted litany, now louder, now clearer. Each syllable was etched into the air itself, vibrating in the marrow of my bones. I knew, with a certainty that felt ancient, that this was no shrine to the Emperor, but a monument to something older that had worn his image as a mask. The custodian forced himself upright, though unsteadily, as if the very ground betrayed him. His spear shook in his grasp. He turned to me, his voice strained, cracked by disbelief. "Do not look. Do not let it take root in you. Remember terror. Remember the throne. Remember him." His words carried command, but the tremor betrayed the crumbling edges of his faith. And then we heard it, the sound of footsteps behind us, slow, deliberate, echoing through the labyrinth with a weight that was neither custodian nor human. The cadence was wrong, each step stretching too long, striking too deep. The custodian wheeled, his spear raised, but even he hesitated at the sound. For a moment, silence pressed against us, suffocating. Then came the crackle of Vox interference, hissing through the custodian's comms like a dying flame. At first it was only static, but then the distortion shaped itself into words. Not words of command, nor words of warning, but the same litany I had spoken moments before, syllables twisted, reversed, unclean. Yet the voice was familiar. It was the voice of a custodian, filtered through the Vox, but stretched and warped, until it no longer carried the timbre of man. The custodian beside me froze, his armor rigid. His vox bead answered, unbidden, with its own fragments, repeating the chant back as though both sides of the conversation had already been written. I could hear the reversed prayer intertwining with the pounding in my skull, and with dawning horror, I realized it was not only my voice that had carried it. The vault itself was speaking through us all. My quill scratched again without my hand guiding it, words spilling across the parchment in jagged lines, each symbol darker than the last. The custodian tightened his grip on me, though whether to shield me or to keep me from joining the chant, I could not tell. His voice broke through, hoarse but defiant. "We must find the override, scribe. Whatever walks here, whatever speaks here, it cannot be allowed to leave." But the footsteps drew closer, and with them, the litany deepened. It was no longer just sound but vibration, rattling my teeth, pressing on my chest, echoing from the distorted shrine. My lips trembled, ready to speak again, though I willed them shut. And still the vox repeated, over and over, a custodian's voice yet not his own, carrying the same inverted prayer into the darkness ahead. The last thing I heard before the chamber drowned in silence was my own breath shaping words I swore were not mine, echoing perfectly the corrupted chant resounding through the vault. The echo of that reversed litany had scarcely faded when the first sound of armored plates shifting reached us from the darkness. At first, I thought it the statues again, their stone limbs groaning to life, but then I saw them, and my breath caught. It was the fallen custodians. Brothers who had stood only moments before, as paragons of living gold, now rose again, their movements too precise, too deliberate, as if pulled on strings. Their armor gleamed faintly, not with the radiant sheen of sanctity, but with a dim and sickly light that pulsed beneath the cracks of their once perfect forms. Their eyes glowed a dull amber, yet no soul lingered there. They turned as one toward us, their weapons raised, though their motion was mechanical, drained of all will. "My mouth betrayed me again," I whispered, without command, syllables that synchronized with the rhythm of their chant. It was my voice, yet also theirs, woven into one. The custodian beside me stiffened, his massive hand tightening on his spear. I could hear him grinding his teeth behind the helm, fighting not the foe before him but the despair that sought to claim his heart. When the revenants advanced, he did not hesitate. With a roar, he struck. His spear pierced the first, splitting its cuirass, and the corpse buckled under the force. Yet, when the armor tore apart, no blood spilled. Instead, golden dust exhaled from the wound, shimmering briefly in the torchlight before scattering into the air. The revenant collapsed, motionless, but the custodian staggered, as though the act had broken something within him. "Forgive me, brothers," he muttered, low and hoarse. Then another came, and he struck again. Each kill was precise, brutal, necessary, yet each left him heavier, as though the weight of fratricide pressed against his very soul. I hid behind a broken column, my quill still moving of its own accord, recording the unfolding horror even as I tried to tear the parchment away. My whispers never ceased, and with each word the revenants seemed to match me, their chants deepening into a dreadful chorus that reverberated through the chamber. I noticed then what the custodian could not, for he was blinded by grief and fury. Every corpse that fell dissolved into golden fragments. The dust did not scatter aimlessly. It drifted downward, clinging to the floor, where it began to arrange itself into patterns. I leaned forward, clutching the edge of the pillar, staring at the forming shapes. They were not random. The fragments aligned with uncanny precision, tracing lines and circles, arcs that intersected with mathematical purity. They were maps not of the chamber, not of terror, but of the heavens themselves. Star maps, sprawling across the vault floor, shimmering faintly as though lit by invisible constellations. The custodian slew another brother, his spear snapping bone and steel alike, and another pattern flared into being. The dust spiraled outward, joining the expanding design until the entire chamber floor was threaded with golden geometry. My skin prickled as I realized the symbols did not merely resemble maps, they were alive, shifting subtly, as though charting not the stars as they were, but as they moved, eternally in motion. Then I saw where the dust was drifting. Slowly, inexorably, the fragments bled toward the reliquary blade. The weapon hovered still, suspended in the stale air, quivering faintly as if breathing. Each mote of dust was drawn into its orbit, coiling around it in delicate spirals. I watched in awe and dread as the sword drank in the remnants of the dead, its surface growing darker, its edges humming with a vibration that pulsed in time with the litany. I could not stop speaking. The custodian turned then, his shoulders heaving, his spear dripping with ichor that was not ichor. His voice broke through the chant, raw and strangled. "Do you see what it does, scribe? Do you see what we are made to destroy?" His words were thunder, but beneath them I heard the crack of something splintering within him. For each revenant he felled, he cut deeper into himself, and the vault devoured his anguish. Another revenant advanced, its helm split, jaw slack, eyes burning faintly. The custodian met it with a scream that shook dust from the ceiling, severing its torso with a blow that echoed like a tolling bell. Golden dust burst outward, and again the fragments spun toward the blade. The sword quaked now, its hunger unmasked, its pull undeniable. I could not look away. My quill scratched frantically, tracing the patterns that emerged, though I no longer knew whether I was recording or replicating them. My whispers grew louder, merging with the chant of the risen, and I realized with horror that I was calling the dust, summoning it to its destination. My body trembled, caught between revulsion and surrender, yet still I spoke. The custodian, drenched in despair, slew the last of his fallen brothers with a strike that shook the chamber. He dropped to one knee, chest heaving, his spear heavy in his grip. He whispered a prayer, whether to the emperor or to silence. I could not tell. Around us, the golden dust converged in a radiant stream, spiraling faster and faster toward the reliquary blade. Then it happened. The sword jolted forward, no longer suspended but propelled as if by unseen will. It drove itself into the chest of one fallen custodian whose corpse had not yet fully dissolved. The sound was not steel on steel, but something deeper, a resonance that shook my teeth, a vibration that made the air itself groan. The body convulsed, armor cracking, bones snapping, flesh reshaping beneath the golden shell. The dust surged into him, fusing with armor and sinew alike. His broken frame stretched, towering higher than any custodian should stand. The reliquary blade protruded from his chest like a second heart, its blackened surface pulsing as though it beat with stolen blood. His eyes ignited with golden fire, brighter than any of the revenants before, and when he exhaled, it was not breath but a stream of dust that swirled in geometric spirals around him. I could not move. I could only whisper, voice breaking into the chant that had haunted me since the beginning. The custodian beside me rose slowly, spear trembling in his hand, staring at the towering entity that had once been his brother. His voice was hollow, stripped of all certainty. The dead speak gold. And in that moment, I knew the battle was no longer of flesh and steel, but of voices and wills, and mine was already unraveling. The chamber shook as the new being straightened, its immense frame casting shadows that swallowed even the golden vault's light. The reliquary blade jutted from its chest like a keystone anchoring its existence, pulsing with a rhythm that felt too deliberate, too alive. When it spoke, the sound was not a voice, but an avalanche of voices, thousands, layered and discordant, yet united in dreadful clarity. The air thickened with each syllable, as though language itself strained beneath its weight. "I am the custodian who was never crowned," it declared, and my bones vibrated with the proclamation. Its words were not heard alone, but felt, resonating within marrow and thought. I am the oath broken before it was spoken, the ward left unguarded, the throne that was promised yet denied. I clutched my scrolls tighter, knuckles white, my mind rebelling. The Custodes were eternal, unsullied, chosen by the master of mankind himself. None among them could exist outside that perfection, and yet here stood one claiming a truth I could not deny. My faith cracked audibly within me, as if a stone column split down its center. The surviving custodian did not falter. His spear hummed as its power field awakened, and his voice thundered across the chamber, fierce with defiance. "There is no throne but his. There are no oaths but his. You are an aberration, nothing more." He charged, each stride carrying the weight of his undying loyalty, golden armor catching the fractured light. The spear struck true. Its point plunged into the entity's shoulder with the force to shatter tanks. For a heartbeat, golden ichor spilled in rivulets, but then, impossibly, the wound knit closed, flesh and armor sealing as though time itself reversed. The custodian struck again, driving the blade deeper into the creature's flank, tearing it free and striking once more. Each blow was perfect, each delivered with a warrior's precision honed across centuries. Yet, each wound closed, leaving no mark, no proof of the effort. I could not breathe. My whispers had fallen silent, but the voices in my skull had not. They echoed what the entity spoke, threading meaning through madness. The being did not retaliate. It simply raised one immense hand, movements deliberate, almost gentle. The custodian raised his spear, preparing for the inevitable strike, but no strike came. Instead, the great hand pressed against his helm, palm spanning from crown to jaw. The chamber went deathly still, as though all else awaited what would follow. The entity leaned close, its thousand-layered voice lowering to a susurrus that brushed against the vault walls like wind through hollow bones. I could not hear all the words, but fragments reached me. They were truths cloaked in venom, or venom cloaked in truths I could not distinguish which. "You were forged in his image," the voices said, "but the mold was broken. You are guardians not of his throne, but of the silence he fears. You bleed gold, but your veins were never yours." The custodian stiffened beneath that colossal hand. His spear wavered. He struggled as if each syllable wormed deeper into his flesh, prying apart loyalty from belief. His armor groaned with his convulsions, as though it too resisted the weight of knowledge being poured into him. I pressed my back against the broken pillar, shaking. My quill fell silent at last, parchment stained with incomplete litanies. I wanted to scream at him to resist, to remind him of the throne, the emperor, the eternal vigilance that bound them. Yet my lips would not part. My faith had cracked, and no words of loyalty remained untainted. The custodian groaned, a sound not of pain but of something deeper, a breaking. His spear clattered to the ground, its golden haft ringing as it struck the patterned floor. The voices continued, weaving through him. "You were never meant to stand eternal," the entity intoned. "You were meant to kneel, not to him, but to the promise he usurped. You are mine, as you have always been." The custodian's gauntleted hands rose slowly to his helm. At first I thought he sought to tear it free in defiance, to bare his face before the falsehood that sought to consume him. But as the seconds stretched, I saw the tremor in his fingers, not of rage, but of surrender. His breaths came heavy, ragged, echoing within the helm. "No, no," he muttered, though even his denial trembled with doubt. The entity leaned closer, its massive frame enclosing him, voice soft as a father whispering to a child. I felt the sound, the weight of truths too heavy for mortal minds, pressing into me though they were not meant for me. The custodian fell to his knees, his gauntlets locked against the clasps of his helm. I bit my tongue until it bled, willing him to resist, to strike once more, to be the golden shield he was forged to be. But resistance had already fled his posture, melted from his stance. The clasps gave way with a hiss. His armor released the helm he had worn for centuries, perhaps since the day of his ascension. He lifted it slowly, with reverence or resignation I could not tell, and let it fall. The helm struck the floor with a weight far beyond its mass, echoing through the vault like a knell. For the first time, I saw his face. It was not fear that marked it, nor rage, but something worse, acceptance. His eyes were glassy, unfocused, yet fixed upon the entity before him as though seeing not a foe, but a revelation. And as he knelt there, bareheaded before the being who named itself the custodian who was never crowned, I felt the air in the chamber shift, as though a page had turned in a book written long before humanity's birth. The chapter of loyalty had ended. What began now, I dared not name. The fallen helm still rang in my ears when the change began. At first, it was subtle, the sound of metal warping under unseen heat, a faint groan that echoed in the chamber. The custodian, kneeling bareheaded before the towering entity, shuddered. His auramite plates bent inward, as if kneaded by invisible hands. Gilded surfaces rippled like wax in flame, curling and stretching into grotesque ridges. His skin, once pallid with strain but still human, caught the same distortion. It glistened, then fractured, facets of crystalline growth rising beneath the surface. Where flesh should bleed, refracted light shimmered, prismatic veins crawling across his neck and jaw. His voice broke into a dozen tones at once, every denial layered with affirmation, every word a chord of resonance that did not belong to any mortal tongue. "I serve," he gasped, though the word served not as resistance but declaration. His eyes no longer reflected the entity before him, but glowed inward, consumed by patterns I could not comprehend. The armor sealed itself to his crystalline flesh, no longer protector but parasite. I could not watch more. My knees buckled, and instinct cowardice, perhaps survival, drove me to flee. My quills and scrolls spilled from trembling hands as I turned and stumbled into the darkened corridors beyond the chamber. The vault's architecture writhed around me. Hallways lengthened, arches bent, and doors shifted like jaws swallowing themselves. The golden geometry that had once radiated order now betrayed reason, rearranging with every breath I drew. I ran without knowing where. My boots struck sigil-etched floors that pulsed faintly beneath each step, veins of dull red light threading outward, as though the vault itself acknowledged me. My lungs burned, but the air remained thick, humid with something more than moisture. The whispers had returned, yet not from the relic. They came from every surface, every shadow, and worst of all, from my own lips. The vox crackled in my ear, sudden and sharp. "Watcher Corps, scribe, respond. Status report, immediately." The voice bore the clipped authority of the Ordo Custodes. Command. For a fleeting second, relief surged. I was not forsaken, not wholly abandoned in this abyss. My mouth opened, desperate to reply. But the sound that emerged was not my own. My words echoed layered, distorted, each syllable mirrored backward even as I tried to shape them. "The vault breathes," my voice said without my consent. "The gold remembers." Horror sealed my throat. I tore the vox bead from my ear and hurled it into the shifting dark, the crackle of unanswered calls trailing off into silence. I pressed onward, half blind. The corridors narrowed, walls bending until they seemed to lean upon me, their engravings alive with geometries I could not name. My fingers brushed one surface, and I recoiled. The stone pulsed warm, like skin over bone. Still I fled, heart hammering with each distorted echo of pursuit behind me. Whether the crystalline custodian or the false one followed, I dared not look back. At last, the walls opened into a spiral stair carved in shadow. It descended steep, each step damp with condensation, slick beneath my boots. The air grew colder, heavy with the weight of something deeper than the palace's bedrock. Each breath tasted of iron and stone dust, and yet I descended, clutching my robes, whispering prayers half-remembered, half-twisted. The spiral seemed endless, unspooling into eternity, until finally the air shifted once more, stiller, heavier. At its base lay another door. It dwarfed all before it, a gate of iron-black metal veined with patterns too intricate for human hand. Unlike the vault we had breached above, this one bore no seals, no visible locks. It radiated restraint, as though the act of keeping it closed was itself an unspoken command written into existence. My knees trembled before it. And then, without touch or signal, the gate shuddered. Ancient hinges groaned, metal creaking like bones unsettled after millennia. Slowly, ponderously, the door began to part. Darkness bled outward, swallowing the faint light of the stairwell, pressing against me with the weight of a presence too vast to be contained. I could not breathe. My quill hand shook, ink spilling across parchment, as I forced myself to write even now, to record even as my own voice betrayed me. For what stirred beyond that opening was not meant to be seen, and yet the vault chose to reveal it. The door creaked wider, unveiling blackness that was not absence but invitation. The vault door opened as though it had been waiting for me. Its weight groaned through stone and silence, the echo reverberating deeper than sound alone, like a tremor that rolled along the marrow of bone. Cold mist billowed outward, brushing against my skin with the unnatural sensation of hands unseen. I stepped across the threshold, lantern stuttering, light bending strangely as though reluctant to touch what lay inside. The air itself felt denser here, each breath stolen and rationed, as if a tithe were owed simply for daring to inhale. The chamber was vast, its edges obscured in shadows that seemed thicker than night. Along the walls stood mirrors, tall and flawless, their surfaces rippling faintly like disturbed water. They reflected not me, not truly. Each pane offered a distorted vision, my posture bent when I stood tall, my face hollow where it should have been whole. Some showed me armored in robes of authority I had never worn, others seated upon a throne I had never touched. Each reflection whispered treachery to the mind, daring me to doubt the stability of my own form. I dared not linger on them too long, and then my eyes rose to the throne itself. It dominated the chamber's heart, vast, sculpted entirely of gold, so bright it pained the eyes, yet so cold that frost rhymed its steps. It was empty, but its absence radiated a crushing weight, as though the air itself bowed before an unseen occupant. The throne was not silent, it hummed, an inaudible vibration seeping into teeth, into skull, into the very rhythm of thought. My knees threatened to buckle, yet something compelled me forward, as if the chamber demanded witness. Upon its armrests lay broken chains, thick links shattered as though by some impossible force. They glistened faintly with oil or ichor, substance that pulsed with memory. The suggestion was clear. Something once sat here, restrained, its power too dangerous to permit freedom. My quill hand shook as I etched the image in my mind, though words failed to capture the magnitude. This was no relic of man's craft. This was a prison disguised as majesty. The silence did not last. A glimmer stirred in the air, a sliver of golden dust drifting, as though drawn by magnetic inevitability. The reliquary blade entered the chamber of its own volition, floating with solemn grace, its point angled toward the throne. Its surface shimmered faintly, whispering in a voice I felt rather than heard, carrying syllables of a tongue older than terror itself. I recoiled, but behind it came the towering custodian host, his form warped, auramite twisted into crystalline protrusions, flesh translucent, voice echoing through every fold of the chamber. He moved with reverence, each step tolling like the strike of a cathedral bell. The throne reacted. Its golden mass quivered, not like metal, but like something breathing. The mirrors lining the chamber rippled violently, images shifting without my movement. I glimpsed myself enthroned, flesh blackened, robes decayed, stars bleeding from the hollows of my sockets. In another pane, I sat crowned in light, yet my lips moved in prayers I could not hear, while shadows writhed behind me like leashed beasts. Each reflection a future, each a lie or perhaps a promise. My stomach convulsed with nausea at the thought that these were not fabrications, but truths scattered across diverging paths of fate. The custodian host raised his hands as though to offer benediction, and the reliquary blade descended into his grasp. Yet it did not. Rest there it hovered above, aligning itself with his chest. Slowly, impossibly, it sank into him, piercing without blood, embedding like a heart reforged. Light erupted, not holy, not pure, but fractured gold refracted into a prism of unnatural hues, bleeding violet and black at their edges. The host convulsed, yet did not scream. Instead, his layered voice rose, harmonized with unseen choirs, building until the mirrors trembled with each syllable. I clutched my ears, but the sound was not contained by flesh. It resonated within thought, within memory. The throne leaned forward not by movement, but by the pressure of presence, as though its vacancy were filling. And then came the voice. It was not the custodians alone. It was layered with thousands, male and female, human and inhuman, deep as oceans and thin as whispers carried across dust. It filled the chamber until there was no air left. "The true emperor is absent." The words splintered through me. My knees struck the frost-coated stone, lungs straining as though crushed beneath a mountain. The mirrors screamed with soundless light, each reflection convulsing into grotesque parody. I saw myself crowned in maggots, enthroned within a throne of bone. I saw terror ablaze, its continents fracturing into flame. I saw the Astronomicon flicker and collapse, leaving void unlit. All while the golden throne before me pulsed in confirmation, as though acknowledging a secret I had never dared suspect. The custodian's form loomed over it, no longer a brother of mankind's guardians, but something transfigured by possession. His crystalline flesh glowed with internal constellations, shifting patterns like star maps rearranged. He spread his arms in proclamation, and in every mirror I saw him multiplied, some kneeling in adoration, others commanding legions, others enthroned themselves upon galaxies of dust. His truth was not singular. It was a chorus of possibilities made flesh. I tried to rise, to flee, yet my limbs rebelled. The weight of revelation anchored me, for in the marrow of my mind I knew the words spoken were not falsehoods crafted to deceive. They carried the certainty of law, the weight of inevitability. "The throne above is hollow," the voice continued, fracturing across tones. "The master you serve is bound to silence. His absence is your inheritance." I dared not look upon the mirrors, but they forced themselves upon me regardless. I saw the golden throne of the surface, empty, dust caked upon its seat, the husk that should have occupied it long since rotted into ash. I blinked, and the vision shifted, yet the weight of it lingered. Doubt seared into faith, faith cracked into ruin. The chamber quaked as though its architecture itself shuddered in agreement. Dust cascaded from unseen heights. The frost upon the throne's steps shattered into mist. The reliquary blade pulsed within the custodian's chest like a second heart, each beat synchronizing with the vibrations of the chamber. I pressed myself to the stone floor, eyes clenched, tears unbidden, my quill fallen from trembling fingers. Yet even with eyes shut tight, the visions did not fade. They burned upon the back of my skull, seared into me as truths that could never again be denied. And as the voice fell silent, leaving only the echo of absence, the chamber seemed to breathe once more. Not with life, but with expectancy, as though it awaited my acknowledgement, my submission, or my ruin. I dared not answer. The last words lingered in air thick with cold. "The true emperor is absent." The chamber still trembled with the words, and I found myself clinging to them as if silence were more dangerous than the blasphemy itself. My breath clouded in the frigid air, the echo of "the true emperor is absent" circling endlessly in my skull. The entity towered before the throne, crystalline veins pulsing like constellations. His voice, no, their voice, for it was a choir, of countless throats layered into one rose again, reshaping the weight of the chamber. "The husk above is but a shell," it intoned, and the mirrors quivered violently, rippling with images that struck like knives. "The flesh on the throne is not master, but memory. What stirs here is the residue of truth left behind." I wanted to shout denial, to summon the liturgies drilled into me from my novitiate, to bind myself in faith as armor. But the mirrors betrayed me. Each one showed a custodian kneeling. Golden giants who should have been unyielding in loyalty bent their helms toward the golden throne in supplication. Their forms flickered between pristine warriors and decayed revenants, yet all bowed with the same devotion. Their voices echoed faintly from the glass, chanting litanies twisted beyond recognition. The sound burrowed deep, as though memory itself were being rewritten. I clutched my head, forcing myself to remember the true hymns, the true vows, but the more I resisted, the more the chamber pressed its revelations against me. The reliquary blade pulsed within the chest of the custodian host, resonating with the throne like a beacon. My quill hand, though trembling, etched the realization before it slipped away. The blade had never been meant as a weapon. Its edge had been secondary, a ruse. It was a key, a cipher carved into metal. Its presence demanded to unseal the chamber where this hidden throne lay. We had been pawns escorting it to its destination, blind servants in a game older than imperial memory. The custodian host moved with terrible grace. He sank to one knee before the throne, auramite reshaped into crystalline ridges that caught the faint light and split it into fractured rainbows. His head bowed, layered voices falling silent as if he awaited command. The throne pulsed in answer, its armrests vibrating, the broken chains shivering with memory of use. I thought then of terror's surface, of the throne above, and horror gripped me. One throne to command, another to conceal. A hiss cracked through my vox link, startling me into a stumble. For a moment, I dared hope for salvation, but the chatter was frantic, distorted by static. Alarms raised breach beneath the palace, impossible depths. The voices overlapped, custodian command and ordo voices mingling, all demanding status reports, all unaware how far the descent had already gone. My throat seized. I tried to respond, but when I opened my mouth, my own voice came out doubled, distorted like the host's, layered with tones not mine. Panic clawed me. I tore the vox free, its crackling chatter trailing sparks as I hurled it to the ground. My words were no longer my own. It was already too late. The mirrors lining the vault walls shuddered violently, cracks splintering across their surfaces. The sound was not glass breaking, but bone splitting, ligaments tearing. I stumbled back, shielding my face as shards began to peel away, not falling, but drifting outward into the air like fragments of ice caught in a current. Through the fractures seeped movement, forms without outline, shadows too dense for the light to touch. Cold pressure filled the chamber, distinct presences flooding through the gaps where mirrors once bound them. Whispers slithered, syllables too old to be words, brushing the edges of my mind like knives dragged gently across skin. These were no mere reflections escaping. They were entities that had been contained, restrained behind false images, imprisoned within mirrored wards. Their release was neither chaotic nor frenzied. They moved with purpose, as though they had been waiting centuries for this moment. The custodian host did not resist. He bowed deeper, crystalline flesh shimmering, the reliquary blade beating like a second heart. The throne seemed to inhale, the frost upon its steps vaporizing into a mist that spiraled upward in coils. My legs weakened as gravity itself shifted, as if the chamber leaned inward toward that seat of gold. I pressed my palms against the cold stone floor, quill long abandoned, parchment scattering like forgotten prayers. My heart pounded with the futility of faith cracking under the burden of revelation. I wanted to shut my eyes, but the mirrors forced themselves upon me even in their ruin. They showed me, enthroned in rot, stars bleeding around me. They showed me kneeling beside the host, whispering devotions in languages I did not know. They showed me silent and absent, as if I had never been at all. Above the throne, the air shimmered. Dust condensed, golden and black, coalescing into form. It began as haze, then a silhouette, then wait the impression of something vast and unseen, preparing to stir. The broken chains rattled again, louder this time, their ends glowing faintly as if heated by breath from a furnace. My instinct screamed to flee, yet there was nowhere left to run. The stair was behind me, but its steps had warped, elongated, bending like wax beneath heat. Reality itself no longer obeyed the laws I had known. The only path was forward, toward the throne and its occupant who had yet to rise. The entity's voice swept the chamber once more, resonant and certain, carrying not only through the air, but through the marrow of every living thing within range. Bear witness. The husk above is false. The master you worship sits empty. Here, in silence, the remnant stirs, and the inheritance of gold is revealed. I clutched my chest, lungs convulsing with each syllable. My thoughts frayed like cloth tearing under strain, my faith a brittle relic already turning to dust. The throne pulsed again, a heartbeat deeper than time, and in that moment I knew the chapter of silence was ending. The mirrors cracked fully, shattering into pieces that dissolved before they touched the ground, each shard releasing another whispering shadow into the chamber. They circled the throne like satellites, their forms vague, their intent undeniable. The reliquary blade pulsed one last time, fusing utterly with the crystalline heart of the custodian host. His body trembled, not in resistance but in reverence. And then the throne moved. Its vast golden frame groaned as if it had been holding its breath for millennia. The chains snapped taut, then fell slack. The silhouette upon it thickened, a weight pressing into the world. The occupant began to rise. The throne stirred fully now, not merely in symbol but in substance, and what rose from its seat defied any measure of flesh or sanctity. A figure, humanoid in outline, but its substance was neither bone nor auramite. Fractured plates of gold hovered in disjointed patterns, shards that caught no true light yet blazed with radiance stolen from void itself. Between the golden fragments stretched seams of darkness alive, seething with threads of unlight that pulsed like veins. Every moment it rose, it spoke, though no mouth was visible, each syllable a paradox that collapsed sense, even as it demanded obedience. I am bound, I am unbound, I am the remnant, I am the whole, I was before, I am after. The custodian host collapsed to both knees before it, head bowed so deeply his crown scraped the cold stone. His armor, half crystalline, half metal, vibrated in resonance with the being's voice, as though each syllable were hammering him into a new shape. But he was not alone. One by one, across the chamber, other golden giants fell into kneeling postures. Some had already died, risen again, and yet still bent the knee. Others were statues, once immobile, now compelled into motion. Their auramite frames groaned but did not resist. It was not worship they had not chosen. It was will, the crushing weight of it, that pressed them down like grain under a millstone. I fought to remain standing, but the same force closed around me, inexorable as tide. My limbs trembled. Each step forward was stolen from me, not given. My quill arm shook violently, scraping ink across parchment in spirals and lines I did not will, as though recording was now dictated by the presence itself. My throat constricted, the breath pulled from me, words forming at the edge of my mouth. I realized then with dawning terror, I had been chosen. Not a warrior of the throne, not a vessel of gold, but I, the scribe, frail and insignificant, was being dragged into service as the mouthpiece of this ascending prisoner. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached, resisting. My skull rang with pressure. Behind my eyes visions burst, seas of stars inverted, golden fleets burning, and a single figure chained beneath worlds. My mind splintered, every thought shattering like glass beneath hammer. To resist was pain unbearable, to yield promised only annihilation. Above, salvation threatened briefly. The vault ceiling thundered, dust raining down from impossible heights. Explosions roared as surface custodians enacted breach protocol, saturating the substructures with force meant to obliterate any heresy. The tremors shook the chamber, a war drum of loyalty resounding above. For a moment, hope flared in me. But the throne did not stir with alarm. The fractured figure only raised a hand, golden shards pivoting in orbit around its form. The walls of the vault shivered, then drank the bombardments whole. Each impact was swallowed by the stone, not resisted but absorbed, the energy sinking into the chamber itself like water into sand. The throne pulsed brighter, as though fed by the very attacks meant to end it. No prison falls from without, the being declared. Its contradictions twisted every word. Stone is not stone. Terror is not terror. The reliquary is not within the palace. The palace is the reliquary. My breath caught. It was not merely this chamber, not this throne. The entire imperial palace, its vaults and halls, its endless foundations, all of terror itself was the containment. The golden throne above was no seat of triumph, but a lock, the emperor's body a husk upon it, a distraction, a mask to draw eyes away from what was truly bound. Every custodian oath, every ordo secret, every sacrifice it had not been guardianship, but maintenance of a prison older than Imperium. I screamed denial, but no sound came. My lips moved against my will, syllables spilling out, words in no tongue of man or Xenos, each one a wound cut into air itself. My vision bled with static, as though the chamber itself were recording my speech and feeding it back. I clutched my ears, but the sound came from within, vibrating through my ribs. I staggered forward, dragged until I stood at the base of the throne. The entity leaned down, its void light burning in seams between golden fragments. I saw within its gaps not emptiness but horizons, spirals of galaxies dying and reborn, chains of light binding constellations. I wanted to look away, but its gravity held me fast. "You will speak," it said, not command, but certainty. "You will utter what has been forgotten." I resisted with all the strength left to me, digging nails into my palms until blood slicked my hands. My tongue burned, my throat swelled, but still the words clawed upward. The custodians, kneeling, did not raise their heads. They did not resist. I alone shook beneath the weight, but even my rebellion was futile. The ceiling shook again, surface forces redoubling their assault. The vox crackled in the dust, faint voices shouting, "Containment breach! Seal all lower levels!" Their desperation reached me like a prayer half-heard, and for an instant I thought I could ride that echo to freedom. But the vault pulsed once more, and the voices were silenced in static. I fell to my knees. My mouth opened. The sound that came was not mine. It was a scream that was not a scream, syllables fractured and infinite, coordinates strung in patterns beyond any star chart known to man. Numbers woven into dirges, positions outside the galaxy's edge, places that had no names because none had ever mapped them. Each utterance tore at my throat, yet the voice did not falter. I felt blood seep from my ears, hot trails across my jaw. I was speaking not as myself, but as conduit, a herald of something chained, now unchained. My body shook with each coordinate, each pulse of geometry tearing through me. The throne figure loomed above, and I knew then that whatever prison terror had been, it was no longer intact. The last words tore free of me, shrieking into the vault like beacons cast into the void. My voice collapsed into silence, lungs empty, eyes darkening. I realized dimly that I was still alive only because the being willed it so. And the chamber echoed with the truth. The coordinates had been given. They tell me I was found 3 days later, though I have no memory of the hours between. When I woke, or rather when awareness returned to me, the chamber was sealed. The air was cold, sterile, stripped of the humidity that had once clung to the stones. Around me lay only silence, yet not the true silence of death, but the kind that has swallowed sound whole and keeps it locked away. I could not move. My limbs were heavy, not with chains or restraints, but with weight deeper than bone. The custodians were gone. Not one stood watch, not one knelt in prayer. No golden figures moved in vigil. Their presence had been erased from the place as though they had never existed, though in the air I could still taste their oaths, shattered and unbound. I alone remained, the last survivor, and yet I was no longer myself. Later, in the transcripts compiled by the Ordo Custodes, it is written that my body was discovered within a secondary chamber, entombed by walls that should not have been there, architecture that no design of terror had ever sanctioned. They called it a mirage of stone, a distortion, yet they could not deny that its seal was perfect. When the strike cadre cut their way inside, they found me, kneeling, back arched, mouth open in silence, as though still screaming though no sound emerged. The parchment I had carried was black with ink, spirals layered upon spirals, numbers folded into geometries. They could not burn it. The fire recoiled, so they preserved it as evidence, sealed away. Of the custodians, only fragments remained dust, auramite shards, ichor turned to brittle resin. No bodies, no statues, nothing that could be claimed as whole. Yet the auspex logs from those who recovered me show faint pings, like life signs echoing within the walls themselves, as though the chamber still breathed with unseen lungs. My own state was called comatose. Physicians of the palace declared that my brain was intact, though it pulsed with erratic waves beyond human measure. I should not have survived, they said. The resonance should have broken every vessel, every nerve. And yet I endured not by my strength, but because something else had been anchored inside me. The being that rose from the throne had not been banished, not destroyed. It had been caught, its emergence arrested, and the vessel that held it was me. My body, fragile and trembling, had become its reliquary. The decision was swift and cruel. Protocol dictated that I could not be allowed to awaken. To kill me outright was judged impossible. The resonance within would not permit it. So the alternative was chosen. They condemned me to a deeper vault still. Stasis field prepared not to heal but to contain. I was to be interred alive. My life stretched into eternity without breath or dream, an unending moment of silence. Yet, as I write this last line, before the field clamps shut upon my mind, I know their design will fail. Already I dream. Even now, with the world muffled, I see corridors of endless gold stretching beyond measure. I walk them barefoot, quill in hand, and at each turn statues line the way. They are not still. Their chests rise and fall, stone lungs drinking eternity. Their eyes follow, unblinking. They are waiting. The coordinates I spoke, they were recorded, sealed, classified in the deepest crypts of the palace. No one is permitted to read them, save the highest. But sealed knowledge is never truly buried. Already it hums in the archives, numbers like thorns pushing through paper, geometry weaving itself in margins where no ink was laid. And so the record ends with me, the last witness, bound not to life nor death. In the stillness of the vault where I sleep, machines hum without rhythm. My body remains in its prison of ice and light. Yet beyond the glass, faint and continuous, Vox recordings capture a sound that no one admits hearing. Stone scraping, shallow breaths, whispers of statues that should not speak. They whisper still, waiting.